Welcome back to our reading group series, Reading and Discussing Blackshirts and Reds by Michael Parenti. This time we will be continuing Chapter 1, Rational Fascism, with the fourth section of this chapter, The Rational Use of Irrational Ideology, followed by our group discussion. As always, I need to give the disclaimer that because our reading groups are open to the public and we encourage discussion of any ideas people bring to the table, this means some of the ideas expressed in our discussion may not reflect the actual views of our party on any level. We encourage everyone watching to think critically of any ideas expressed throughout the video, and if you have any disagreement with anything that's said, and no one participating in this discussion brings it up to discuss as a group, please feel free to let us know in the comments so we can address it. Critically examining things is always the best way for all of us to learn and better understand the world, each other, and even ourselves. Now I'll hand it off to Daniel to kick things back off.
All right. Next section, Comrade Jade, unless there's another volunteer.
Yeah, I can get it unless...
Yeah, take it away.
All right. The rational use of irrational ideology. Some writers stress the irrational features of fascism. By doing so, they overlook the rational politico-economic functions that fascism performed. Many of politics is the rational manipulation of irrational symbols. Certainly, this is true of fascist ideology, whose emotive appeals have served a class control function. First, there was the cult of the leader in Italy, Il Duce. In Germany, Der Führerprinzip. With leader worship there came the idolatry of the state. As Mussolini wrote, the fascist conception of life stresses the importance of the state and accepts the individual only insofar as his interests coincide with those of the state. Fascism preaches the authoritarian rule of an all-encompassing state and a supreme leader. It extols the harsher human impulses of conquest and domination, while rejecting egalitarianism, democracy, collectivism, and pacifism as doctrines of weakness and decadence. A dedication to peace, Mussolini wrote, is hostile to fascism. Perpetual peace, he claimed in 1934, is a depressing doctrine. Only in cruel struggle and conquest do men or nations achieve their highest realization. Though words are beautiful things, he asserted, rifles, machine guns, planes, and cannons are still more beautiful. And on another occasion he wrote, war alone puts the stamp of nobility upon the peoples who have the courage to meet it. End quote. Ironically, most Italian army conscripts had no stomach for Mussolini's wars, tending to remove themselves from battle once they discovered that the other side was using live ammunition. Fascist doctrine stresses monistic values. Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one rule, one leader. The people are no longer to be concerned with class divisions, but must see themselves as part of a harmonious whole, rich and poor as one, a view that supports the economic status quo by cloaking the ongoing system of class exploitation. This is the contrast to a left agenda that advocates the articulation of popular demands and sharpened awareness of social injustice and class struggle. This monism is buttressed by atavistic appeals to the mythical roots of the people. For Mussolini, it was a grandeur that was Rome. For Hitler, the ancient Volk. A play written by a pro-Nazi, Hans Jorst, entitled Schlageter, and performed widely throughout Germany soon after the Nazis seized power. Hitler attended the opening night in Berlin. Pits Volk's mysticism against class politics. The enthusiastic August is talking to his father, Schneider. August. You don't believe it, Papa. But young people don't pay much attention to these old slogans anymore. The class struggle is dying out. Schneider. So, and what do you have then? August. The Volk community. Schneider. And that's a slogan? August. No, it's an experience. Schneider. My God, our class struggle, our strikes, they weren't an experience, eh? Socialism, the International, were they fantasies maybe? August. They were necessary, but they are historical experiences. Schneider. So, in the future, therefore, we'll have your Volk community? Tell me, how do you actually envision it? Poor, rich, healthy, upper, lower, all this ceases with you, eh? August. Look, Papa, upper, lower, poor, rich, that always exists. It is only the importance one places on that question that's decisive. To us, life is not chopped up into working hours and furnished with price charts. Rather, we believe in human existence as a whole. None of us regards making money as the most important thing. We want to serve. The individual is a corpuscle in the bloodstream of his people. That's George Mose, Nazi Culture, New York, Grosset, and Dunlap, 1966, 166 to 118. The Sun's comments are revealing. The class struggle is dying out. Papa's concern about the abuses of class power and class injustice is facilely dismissed as just a frame of mind with no objective reality. It is even falsely equated with a crass concern for money. None of us regard making money as important. Presumably, matters of wealth are to be left to those who have it. We have something better, August is saying, a totalistic, monistic experience as a people, all of us, rich and poor, working together for some greater glory. Conveniently overlooked is how the glorious sacrifices are borne by the poor for the benefit of the rich. The position enunciated in that play and in other Nazi propaganda does not reveal an indifference to class. Quite the contrary, it represents a keen awareness of class interests, a well-engineered effort to mask and mute the strong class consciousness that existed among workers in Germany. In the crafty denial, we often find the hidden admission.
Okay, thank you.
I think I knocked out my entire Earth fascism bingo card with this section.
That's the point.
Editing Jade here. In this upcoming discussion, we bring up the concept of social fascists, which we never really explain. So I wanted to give that explanation now for anyone unfamiliar with the term. When we're talking about social fascists, we're talking about one of two groups of people that in practice have the same effect. The first group, which is who I'll be referencing shortly in this discussion, would be those expressly aligned with the bourgeoisie that purposely co-opt policies originating from genuine socialist movements, defang those policies, and use them to disrupt and undermine those very same socialist movements. A great example of this would be FDR in the United States. As you might expect, during the Great Depression, the socialist movement was making leaps and bounds among the people, who could very clearly see that capitalism itself could not work. In places like our own city of Milwaukee, socialists even took control of the city government and began to put in place local social policies to improve the lives of the people, such as pensions for the elderly, unemployment subsidies, and public housing programs, many of which would later be co-opted and packed into FDR's New Deal for nationwide implementation. Organized labor, which had been seeing violent clashes between workers and strikebreakers for decades at this point, sometimes even the U.S. itself acting as those strikebreakers, was becoming more and more militant. In the 1932 presidential election, the combined vote of the Socialist Party and Communist Party candidates together received 2.5% of total votes, despite the rigged U.S. electoral system and FDR already co-opting many of their policies deemed to be less threatening by the bourgeoisie. The New Deal itself was an extremely watered-down and defanged version of the socialist and communist platforms that provided a safety net for workers and regulations for the bourgeoisie to prevent conditions from getting to the point in which people were desperate for radical change, while still maintaining the primacy of capital. Not to mention that the workers having at least some money to be able to consume more is actually beneficial for capitalists in the long run. The National Labor Relations Act as well brought about so-called labor peace, an end to the violent suppression of labor action by the capitalists and the U.S. government. But this, in actuality, was much more beneficial to capital than the workers. Capitalists no longer had to worry about violent retribution from their workers and had guaranteed backing of the state if there was such action. Unions had to adhere to regulations that prevented certain more radical action that might be more likely to get stuff done, and it largely changed the function of unions from organizing workers to make demands from their bosses under threat of a loss of profits, to unions themselves directly negotiating with the employers of the workers they represent. In return, all labor got was a handful of protections for being recognized in the NLRB that might occasionally give employers a slap on the wrist for violating those protections. In the long run, the National Labor Relations Act has in fact been directly harmful to the workers' movement, and not just within the US, with astroturfed anti-communist unions like AFL-CIO being used by the FBI and CIA to suppress communists both here and abroad. And then corporate unions, thanks to constantly negotiating with employers, have become more and more out of touch with the workers they're supposed to be representing, leading to the phenomenon we see today of extremely low unionization rates in the US, and many US workers under the impression that unions don't even act in the interests of workers, let alone be made up of workers themselves. These social fascists methodically and systemically paralyze and dismantle workers' movements to protect the interests of capital, just like traditional fascists, with the difference just coming down to whether they prefer to use the carrot or the stick to do so. But again, that preference isn't so black and white, and one may very well pave the way for the other. The second group that you could consider social fascists would be those social democrats who may start out genuinely aligned with the workers and working class movements, but would rather cooperate with the bourgeoisie to try to nudge them towards making life better for the workers incrementally, then work with the communists and others in this working class movement to demand genuine change. These social democrats may begin with good intentions, but because they agree to play the bourgeoisie's game, in a sort of Uno reverse card, the bourgeoisie are actually the ones who bring these social democrats more in line with them, by gradually allowing these social democrats closer and closer to the mechanisms of power each time that they compromise their stances to be more in line with the bourgeoisie. These social democrats become so convinced that all they need to do is play nicely, and they might someday have the chance to make some minor changes to the structure, and that being too radical would result in the hard work they put in to get close to power coming crumbling down, that they come to see those not cooperating with the bourgeoisie, and instead making demands to change the very foundations of society as more of a threat to what they're trying to get done than the bourgeoisie themselves that are the ones in power denying the changes that they want in the first place. As a result, time and time again throughout history, social democrats have even led the charge in the suppression of communists and other leftists deemed too radical, such as in Germany, where the German Social Democratic Party enlisted the aid of the proto-Nazi Freikorps to suppress the German workers and crush the brewing communist revolution in 1919. Imagine a world where they hadn't done that. While these social fascists may begin and even think they maintain a genuine desire to improve the conditions of the workers, in practice, they still have the same effect as the first type of social fascist. They both paralyze and disarm the masses of their independent organization, allowing the bourgeoisie full control of what reforms do and don't get put in place to ensure that they don't actually threaten the power of capital. Then, they work with the bourgeoisie to crush whatever remains of the movement. Once the movement is crushed and no longer has any power, these social democrats have either become no different from any other bourgeois politician, or they're just cast aside. Then the reforms that were put in place are subtly and methodically chipped away at until there is eventually nothing remaining of them. Just look at all the social programs put in place by the New Deal in the United States. Constantly under attack, or already gone. With all this being said, I should probably make it clear that I suppose it is technically possible for a social democrat to not become co-opted into becoming a social fascist, and actually side with the other strains of the workers' movement when push comes to shove, and we would gladly welcome any social democrats that are willing to work with us, even if we think it's extremely unlikely the social democratic leaders will ever do so due to the fact that professional social democrats are social democrats in the first place because of their willingness to cooperate with the bourgeoisie. However, the social democratic workers themselves are our natural allies, as long as we're able to break their paralysis by helping them see that their leaders are selling them out time and time again in exchange for an ever so slightly closer proximity to power. Now back to the discussion.
Okay, the question for this is, Parenti writes about the use of vague fascist ideology as a way to hide or obscure class ideology. In what ways do we see fascism in the 21st century using this same tactic? And how can we counteract this?
Yeah, I mean, just there was actually a decent non-compete video that came out earlier this week that was on thought terminating cliches. That's just one way, just like phrases that don't really make sense, but they are meant to just like keep people from not thinking about things. And then on top of that, there's also just the trying to put the nation above anything else. Also kind of on the more social fascist side of things, just the other side of the same coin, talking about how we're all in this together and we gotta, unite and all hold hands and sing Kumbaya to kind of like distract from the fact that class does exist. And the bourgeoisie, of course, are not going to be singing Kumbaya with us, even though they're telling us to do so.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so politicians across the world have been doing this for forever, but specifically in the United States, it kind of feels like with Bill Clinton in the 90s is when we started getting this like really distinct, vague political language of like not, not quite answering the question, but saying enough that you think the question's been answered. Yeah,
You're not
like
suggesting that about Slick Willie, are you?
I mean, again, like I know politicians, that's like a hallmark of politicians, but even like, I don't know, I feel like if you watch old clips, even, and I can't believe I'm going to say something positive about Ronald fucking Reagan right now, but even if you see clips of like Reagan, he's like saying something. What he's saying is horrific, but like his words have meaning. He's like laying out a policy. He's making an argument for why this policy is necessary or good, or he's trying to explain why some social ill exists. Again, it's all abhorrent what he's saying, but like he says something substantial. I feel like starting with Clinton, because Clinton's job was to hoodwink the workers into not paying attention to the Democrats taking a very sharp turn to the right in the 90s. And you do that by like using this flowery, vague language that discourages, like I'm assuming non-compete said, I didn't watch his video, but that discourages people from actually thinking like, wait a minute, what is he saying? What are they saying? What are they trying to do here?
Mm.
And that's obviously been going on. Like Obama did that. Clinton, Hillary Clinton did that in '08 and in
Hillary did
2016.
it poorly. The
Yeah,
other
that's
two
why.
did it well.
Yes, that's why one of the reasons why she lost.
Yep. There
Um,
was another one that did it poorly too.
you know, um, and even just the slogan MAGA, like it's cliche at this point because it's been almost a decade, but like, what does MAGA mean? When was America great? And just if you dig into what these slogans mean, what they're actually saying, there's just nothing of substance in any of this stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, Anything else specifically about fascism in our day using the same tactic of vagueness? And I know we were kind of talking more about
Um,
liberal politics.
I guess just to like go in a little bit more into detail on the non-compete video I mentioned. He mentioned how like the Republican Party was using things like just the term just wokeism to kind of denote something that is that their followers just automatically link in their heads to just something that is bad and something that is like trying to attack them or something, without actually like thinking about what it is that like their leaders are saying.
Yeah.
Something I've been thinking about is I guess kind of linking what Jade was saying, just the way that fascists will use these these targeted out groups, so in the Nazis it'd be Jews, Roma, whatever. Now, like in the US, it's, like Latinos, like linking these groups to the problems of society, like as if these things are somehow connected. Like I've heard some arguments of like, yeah, all the immigrants are raising rent prices, or like housing prices are going up because of there are too many immigrants and we don't have enough houses.
Also, who's going to build more houses?
Yeah. Um yeah, or like, oh, like our social services are declining because the illegal immigrants are using them, or they're
These
like,
lazy illegals are trying to take your job.
yeah, like we're just completely nonsensical. Um and yeah, it just serves to obfuscate the actual problem here, which is class and, you know, capitalists gaining more and more power.
Yeah, it's like well, we don't have enough money for education and housing. And then you look at like fucking Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, and you're like, well, between the two of them, they have $200 billion. Do you think maybe we could use some of that for this stuff? Like, it's obviously there so that you don't think of that kind of stuff.
We all
Um,
know the joke about you got the billionaire with the three people at the table. One's uh or no, it's the billionaire, middle class guy, poor guy, and they all are dividing up a cake. The billionaire takes like 99% of it, or whatever, and then takes the 90% of the rest of it, gives it to the middle class guy, and then tells the middle class guy, don't look now, but the poor guy's eyeing up your slice.
yeah,
I told
exactly.
that really poorly, but you get the idea.
Yeah. It's the ultra rich, ultra wealthy, ultra powerful capitalists convincing those of us that are just comfortable enough that the people who have nothing are coming for what we have to keep us from coming for what they have. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so the second part of this question, how can we counteract this? How do we undo the damage of this simplistic, vague, fascist sloganeering and ideology?
I mean, it's not gonna. It's definitely an uphill battle, and we can. And we're definitely gonna have to do more than this because it is such an uphill battle as long as we exist within capitalism. But just trying to teach people and educate people with critical thinking skills.
Hmm.
I like to appeal to people's material interests, and it's tough because at the same time you have to be able to plausibly tell them that you can deliver, but at the same time dissociate yourself from the people that never fucking deliver. But then it's like, well, those are the ones that only could, really, at least in the short term.
Wait, I'm sorry. I didn't follow that quite. You
Yeah,
we
so I was saying, like, talking about like appealing to people's material interests,
right.
and like your average person on the street, they're going to be thinking in an electoral mindset. And so, like, you have to dissociate yourself from the Democrats because that's who they're used to making these promises and never delivering shit.
Hmm.
But then at the same time, now that you've dissociated yourself from the Democrats, they're going to look at you and be like, okay, well, how are you going to actually deliver on it? It's great that you want that, but, and then then it's tougher conversations about, mutual aid and direct action and solidarity and party building and all kinds of other stuff that they may not be that interested in hearing.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Jade said, it's an uphill battle. It's a very unfair fight because at the end of the day, the solution is not simple. Like it's just going to require like 100 years of multiple generations
I like
working
to say it's
together.
simple, but it's not easy. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, although I would argue like even just the details of like, well, how do
Yeah,
you
the
do that?
logistics
Like,
of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
the logistics are not
yeah,
simple at all. But
which
like
is how I,
the
the
point
difficult
is
part.
like it's, appealing to people's baser instincts of these people that don't look like me, don't sound like me, and don't speak the same language that I speak are to blame for all my problems versus explaining that, well, we actually need about a century of really concentrated, coordinated solidarity and like on an international scale so we can finally just get the fuck past capitalism. Um, and that's just like a hard thing to boil down to an elevator pitch that makes sense.
Yeah, something that
Yeah.
You
makes it
know,
real rough for me too is I honestly don't think there's any plausible way to get there or anywhere near there in my lifetime. I'm not doing this for me. I'm not
yeah,
even necessarily doing this for, my, quote unquote children or, necessarily grandchildren. Like it's a down the road thing.
yeah,
I'm putting the framework in place so that somebody else can be, can enter the promised land, even if I can't. And
yeah.
that's real tough to sell people on.
I mean, it's not necessarily the case. I mean, considering we are dealing with fascism means the contradictions are, of course, very much sharpening. And if we can get ready and be ready for the opportunity that is to come, and take that opportunity before the fascists can get their foot in the door, we might be good. Also, fascism is inherently unstable, so.
Not to sidetrack it, but it's an interesting topic. If we can, I'd be curious to get your take on like what that would look like. Is it like a general strike? Is it like militant armed uprising? Is it sabotage? I guess what would it look like?
The revolution.
Yeah, potentially. Obviously, we can't know for sure, but like, what do you necessarily envision?
I'm not sure if that is something we should be talking about.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said, I know it kind of is a tangent, so it could be something we could stick a pin in, but it sounds like an
Okay.
interesting topic.
Yeah.
Just like any route that
we
I see, like, is something where I can't see us being ready in 10, 20 years.
we can possibly come back to that later. I guess
Yeah.
I
Okay.
will say just for now that I mean, it's really up to the masses how it happens.
Yeah, and there's
Um,
different ways to do it.
yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we all know that Vladimir Lenin and Mao Zedong and Fidel Castro, 5 years before they led their revolutions, did not
Yeah.
think they were going to be leading a revolution at 5 years. Like,
Uh,
Mhm.
sometimes a week happens in a decade, decade happens. I
I was,
paraphrased that very poorly.
yeah, I was just going to say, should be pointed out, largely, actually, as it turns out, apocryphal quote. There's
Yeah, it
no
sounds too
one
good to
can
be.
actually find anyone, no one can actually find anywhere where Lenin said or wrote
Yep.
this, but it is attributed to Lenin that there are decades when nothing happens and weeks when decades happen. So like, yeah, shit can start popping off at any minute. Particularly as we enter, or we have been, I would argue, since 2008, really, um, in a crisis that we never really were able to resolve.
Yeah.
Obama was able to just kind of paper over it for a little bit, make everyone feel good about it. But the last decade has just been almost completely unmitigated disaster.
And I think the crisis is there. I just don't think that the people are ready for it. I don't think they're like Lenin had like you guys had said, he had stuff ready to go. What do we have ready to go?
Yeah, and like Jade said, I don't want to get too sidetracked in
Yep.
this because that's a
Yep.
it's
I'll
it's
shut
an
up now.
important but necessary, yeah, it's an important but tangential question. The point being, uh, what we can do, the best that we can do right now is just keep preparing,
Yep.
keep doing what we're doing of trying to build mutual aid networks, trying to build a workers' party, trying to raise class consciousness, trying to empower the masses to understand their situation on a material
100%.
level, and who the hell knows like what's going to happen and when the opportunity presents itself. All we can do is just be ready when it's go time.
Yep.
So,
Try and make it as ready as possible. No, I'm
yeah.
with you on that.
Mhm.
So let's see what I wrote here because I don't remember. In the US, both major bourgeois political parties refuse to discuss class in the Marxist sense, instead, insisting on discussing the lower, middle, and upper classes of income. The label of communist and left wing has been hurled around so often at so many individuals and groups, it has lost all meaning. Education in political history and political economy has been so neglected for decades that it is more and more difficult for the average workers or farmer to conceive of anything outside mainstream media discussions which overtly avoid any discussion of class dynamics or correct history. This can be counteracted by any number of ways, including direct contact with the masses via the internet and non-mainstream forms of communication. I was going to mention that, and then the conversation went long and I forgot. But even just something as simple as just like TikToks and just YouTube shorts, like if that's the media that Gen Z is consuming, let's fucking get all over that, man. That I'm sure we can figure out how to boil something down to like 60 seconds that'll hold someone's attention for that long, you know?
You guys see that video of the Obama speechwriter? I think her name's Sarah Horowitz. A couple of videos of her recently
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen
where
that.
she can't stop saying horrible stuff and doesn't understand how horrible it looks. And
Yeah.
she said exactly that.
Yeah.
That basically, it sucks that like we can't control their media consumption anymore.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Another way would be consistent and simple messaging about ideas of class and Marxist political economy. So like, you know, it might sound a little might feel or sound a little outdated, but if you look at those old pictures of like Russia in the 1910s and especially 1917, you see banners with slogans and phrases that, you know, encapsulate in very simple, direct language the immediate need that can kind of like draw people in. Like, wait, what do you mean peace land bread? I want peace land bread. What do you mean by that? And then you can have the conversation with them. Combating disinformation in ways that are not overly pedantic and easy for average people to understand and agree with. I think the overly pedantic thing is something I will admit I struggle with. I think we all can struggle with this because we all want to be very particular and precise. But for what it's worth, I think personally, when you're talking to just a kind of layperson about this stuff, I try not to get hung up on the details too much because that's not the point. Um, so, and one last thing, learning the rhetorical and logical tricks used by capitalist apologists and fascists so that they can be exposed in real time and maybe even used in our favor, you know, rhetoric and all that kind of stuff.
Thanks for tuning into this video, and thanks to everyone that attended our reading group live. We hope you got something out of this. If you enjoyed this video and want to attend a reading group live yourself, please feel free to reach out to us via email at milwaukee@cpusa.org, DM us on any of our social media, or just come say hi to us at an event that we're at. See you in the next video covering the 5th section of this chapter, Patriarchy and Pseudo-Revolution.